My dear friend in Christ, Jesus often spoke in parables and he used examples from everyday life to give a teaching. Let's take one from the Gospel of Luke chapter 5 verse 38 and 39. Let me read it for you. New wine must be poured into new wineskins, and no one after drinking old wine wants the new wine, for he says the old is better. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. Now, to understand this example that Jesus gives us, we must first understand the process of fermenting wine. Maybe some of those listening to this message already know how to make wine and may be experts too. But in Jesus' time, wine was fermented in the skins of goats. This was a very common practice. After the flesh and bones were removed from the goat, the skin was tanned over fires. Then the openings were tightly stitched together. The neck of the goat was used for the sprout, and unfermented grape juice was poured into what we can now call a goat skin bag. After the bag is filled with unfermented grape juice, the neck was stitched up to close the bag, and with that, the process of fermentation begins. Now here's the important point. A new, or let's say a fresh wineskin will naturally have the capacity to stretch, to expand during the process of fermentation, and so will not break or burst during the process. If new wine was put in an old wineskin, it will crack open. It will burst because the leather skin cannot expand further. So my dear friend in Christ, the making of the wine required new wine in new wineskins for the fermentation to take place successfully. Now what's the message Jesus has for us through this example? One way of understanding is that Jesus is emphasizing that change must first occur internally before external changes could be made. Some Pharisees were like old wineskins. They had become too rigid in their lifestyle and in their traditions, and they were unwilling to change and see that Jesus was placing love above the law and all those strict and burdensome rituals and traditions imposed upon the people. Many who were poor and could not even afford the prescribed sacrifices and rituals. For Jesus, it was an internal disposition of love first. That is the internal change. It is so important to be on our guard that we don't allow our hearts to become so rigid that we become unable to accept new ways and new approaches in relating to one another in a spirit of love. Let me give you an example. A priest once told a man from his parish, "Francis, I must really appreciate your wife for the wonderful service she renders to the church. She is here early in the morning for the Mass. She helps in flower arrangements, in dusting the pews, and comes back again in the evening watering the flower pots. It's really a great sacrifice that your wife is making." And Francis told the priest, "Father, I feel so relieved. My wife spends so much of time in this church. I wish she'd be here for a longer time, because the moment she comes home, she starts barking at me, yelling at the children, nagging my mother, and picks up quarrels with the neighbors for no reason at all." With no offense to the women listening to this message, sometimes it could be the other way around when men folk do the same. My dear friend in Christ, sometimes we do so many things religiously, thinking we could please God, and forget that God is more interested in how lovingly we relate with one another. When we soak ourselves in the understanding of that great principle of love above all things, it is like the fresh grape juice in the fresh goat skins, fermenting, soaking to produce real good wine. The fermenting, the soaking, is the constant renewing of ourselves, our thinking and our outlook towards others. St. Paul in his letter to the Corinthians, second letter to Corinthians chapter 5 verse 17 puts it so beautifully. "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come." So my dear friend in Christ, it is just not good enough to believe in Christ. We must do as he tells us, and that is what the practical and moral teachings of the New Testament is all about. Think about wine and wineskins. May you receive grace to renew your life and your relationship with God and with others. May you have a good and godly day.